My father adjusted his glasses, smiled politely, and said in front of 12 executives, "My daughter struggles to process simple information. Let's keep this meeting efficient." And just like that, I became the joke of the room. I remember the silence that followed. Not the respectful kind, the kind that waits for someone to laugh. And they did. Soft at first, controlled, professional. Then louder, careless, comfortable. Because once someone powerful gives permission to disrespect you, everyone else follows. I stood there holding a printed report I couldn't finish reading. The words blurred, not because I didn't understand them, but because I could feel every eye measuring my worth and deciding it was zero. My father didn't look at me again. He just moved on like I was a temporary inconvenience. That moment wasn't the first time they labeled me as slow, but it was the first time I realized something important. They weren't underestimating me by accident. They needed me to be small, because it made them feel bigger. High school wasn't any different. Actually, it was worse. At least adults pretend to be polite. Teenagers don't. I still remember the day Mrs. Kareem asked me to read out loud. Just a paragraph. Simple. Basic. Something everyone else flew through without thinking. I got stuck on the third line. One word. Just one. The class didn't wait. They never do. Someone in the back whispered, "Lagging system." Another laughed, "Buffering brain." By the time I finished the sentence, I wasn't reading anymore. I was surviving. That was the day they gave me a nickname, Delay.
And it stuck.
Teachers tried to ignore it. My father encouraged it. "Pressure builds strength," he said once, while I sat across from him at dinner, hands shaking, trying to finish homework. He never helped. He only observed, like I was an experiment, not his daughter. But here's the part they never noticed. I stopped reacting. No anger, no tears, just silence. And silence is dangerous when it belongs to someone who's thinking. Because while they were busy defining me, I was studying them. Patterns, behavior, reactions. I noticed how quickly people dismissed what they didn't understand. How they equated speed with intelligence. How confidence, even fake confidence, controlled rooms. So I stopped trying to prove I was smart. I started learning how to control perception instead. At 16, I found my escape. Not books, not people, systems. Code didn't laugh at me when I took too long. It didn't rush me. It didn't judge pauses. It waited, perfectly, patiently, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't slow. I was precise. I spent hours alone building small things. Nothing impressive, just simple logic broken into smaller steps, then smaller, then even smaller, because that's how my mind worked, not fast, but deep. While others jumped to conclusions, I mapped every possibility, every outcome, every flaw, and slowly, that weakness they mocked started becoming something else. Something dangerous. By 18, I wasn't just writing code. I was studying decision-making, how people choose, why they hesitate, what makes them trust something instantly. And one night, I saw it, a pattern, a flaw in how large systems processed user behavior. Something small, almost invisible, but if optimized, it could predict not just actions, but intent. I didn't tell anyone, not my teachers, not my father, especially not him, because I knew something about my father. He didn't respect ideas. He respected control. And if he knew I had something valuable,
He wouldn't support me.
he would take it. So I stayed quiet for 3 years. 3 years of being delay. 3 years of sitting at the edge of rooms, invisible, dismissed. 3 years of building something piece by piece. While they laughed, I let them believe it. I let them think I was stuck, because the less they expected from me, the more freedom I had to move. At 21, I attended my first real boardroom meeting, not as a guest, as an intern. My father's company, or what he called his empire. I sat in the corner, silent, unnoticed. And across the table, I saw them, the same type of people from school, confident,
Loud.
fast talkers, throwing ideas around like they owned the future. One of them looked at me, tilted his head, and smirked. "You here to take notes or process slowly?" The room chuckled. I smiled, just slightly, because I recognized something they didn't. They were still playing the same game. Speed over depth. Noise over precision. That meeting changed everything, because for the first time, I realized their entire system, their entire company, was built on the same flawed thinking they used to judge me. And suddenly, my delay wasn't a weakness anymore. It was a weapon. So I made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive, calculated. I wasn't going to prove them wrong. I was going to let them expose themselves. And then I would own the consequences. I built the algorithm in silence, improved it, tested it, broke it, rebuilt it again. No investors, no announcements, no attention, just results. By the time I was 24, it was ready, not perfect, but powerful enough. So I did something unexpected. I didn't launch it. I didn't pitch it. I didn't even attach my name to it. I sold access anonymously to smaller firms first. Let them use it. Let the market react.
And it did.
Faster than I predicted. Within months, companies using my system started outperforming competitors. Efficiency increased. User retention doubled. Decision accuracy near perfect. People noticed, but they didn't know why. Not yet. Then came the second phase. I started targeting larger companies.
Carefully. Strategically.
Including one very familiar name. My father's biggest competitor. They didn't know who I was. To them, I was just a silent provider with an unusual product. They didn't ask too many questions, because results silence curiosity. And within a year, they started dominating the market. Slowly, then suddenly, like a shadow expanding. My father noticed. Of course he did. He always notices threats. He called emergency meetings, demanded answers, pushed his executives. But here's the thing. They were too busy talking to see what was happening underneath. And I watched, from a distance,
Calm.
patient. Every move they made, every wrong decision, every ego-driven reaction, it all played exactly how I expected, because I built the system to predict people like them. Then came the moment, the one they would never forget. My father's company started losing, not drastically, but consistently. Small losses that stacked quietly, like cracks in glass. No one panics at the first crack, but they should. He didn't know. He was already inside my system. And the day he finally realized something was wrong, he called a private meeting. Only top-level executives.
And me.
For the first time in years, he looked at me directly, not as a daughter, as a variable.
Sit, he said.
I did.
Calm.
Controlled. Silent. The same room where they once laughed. The same people who once dismissed me. But this time, something felt different. They were nervous,
confused,
uncertain. My father leaned forward, eyes sharp, voice steady. "There's a pattern in our losses," he said, "and I don't believe in coincidences." He paused, looked at everyone, then at me. For just a second, too long to be accidental. "Someone is outplaying us." The room went quiet. No laughter this time. I didn't say anything. I just listened, because this was exactly where I wanted them, right before the realization, right before everything collapsed. And then he said something that almost made me smile. "We're going to acquire the source." Acquire. They thought they could buy it, control it, own it, the same way they tried to control everything else, the same way they tried to define me. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the source they were preparing to acquire was already sitting in the room. And I had just signed the final document 30 minutes before this meeting began. The ownership transfer, the controlling stake, the silent acquisition of his competitor, which means when he thinks he's buying power, he's actually stepping directly into mine. I looked at him for the first time without hesitation, and in that moment, he finally saw it. Not weakness, not delay, something else, something he didn't understand.
Yet.
I leaned back slightly and spoke my first sentence in that room.
Calm, clear,
Measured. I think.
pause.
You're already too late. The room froze, and my father's expression shifted for the first time in my life. Not disappointment, not control,
Fear.
but the real truth, the part that would destroy everything he believed, the part I've been hiding for years. I haven't told him yet, because this isn't just about his company. It's about something much bigger, something global, something he unknowingly helped me build. And when he finds out who actually owns the system controlling the entire market, he won't just lose his company. He'll understand that every decision he's made for the past 2 years was never really his. He didn't speak immediately. My father, the man who could dismantle million-dollar negotiations without blinking, just stared at me, trying to calculate, trying to understand, trying to decide if what I said was arrogance or truth. "I think," I repeated softly, letting the silence stretch. "You're already too late." No one laughed this time, because something in my tone didn't invite it. One of the executives leaned forward, forcing confidence into his voice. That's a bold statement for someone who struggled to read a report here. There it was, the past dragged into the present. Predictable. I turned my head slightly, meeting his eyes, not aggressively, just long enough. And then I looked away. Dismissal is louder than any argument. My father finally spoke. "What exactly are you implying?" Careful, controlled, but underneath it tension. He didn't like unknown variables, and I had just become one. I folded my hands on the table, slow, deliberate, every movement measured. "I'm saying, pause. The system you're trying to acquire. Another pause. Let them lean in. Doesn't belong to who you think it does." A ripple moved through the room. Confusion first, then irritation. Because people hate being behind information, especially powerful people. "Who owns it?" someone snapped. I didn't answer.
Not yet.
Instead, I reached into my bag and placed a thin file on the table. No dramatic motion, just quiet placement, the kind that forces attention. My father didn't touch it. Not immediately. He looked at me instead, searching for hesitation, for weakness, for anything that could explain this shift. But I gave him nothing, just stillness. Finally, he opened the file. Page 1. Legal documentation. Ownership structure. Transfer confirmation. His eyes moved fast. Too fast. Because he was trying to reach the conclusion before accepting the details. Classic mistake. He flipped the page. Then another. And then
He stopped.
the room stayed silent. But the energy changed. Something broke. Not visibly, but I felt it. The exact moment control slipped from his hands. That's not possible. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, because denial spoken quietly is far more dangerous. I tilted my head slightly. Which part?
His jaw tightened.
This entity doesn't exist in any of our records. Of course it didn't, because I built it that way. Layered ownership, fragmented visibility, a structure that looks harmless until you connect it, and by then, it's already too late. It exists, I said softly. You just never saw it. The executive who mocked me earlier leaned forward again, more aggressive now. You're telling us you built this? I didn't look at him. I looked at my father. Because this wasn't about them. It never was. I didn't build it alone, I said. Truth carefully shaped. Because the most powerful lies contain just enough honesty. My father narrowed his eyes. Who helped you? There it was. The question he couldn't ignore. Because in his world, no one rises alone. There's always a network, a backer, a hidden hand. I let the silence sit. Then I did. Confusion hit harder this time, because their minds rejected the simplicity. It didn't match their model. They needed complexity to feel safe, and I wasn't giving it to them. You expect us to believe, someone scoffed, that you built a system capable of destabilizing global market patterns by yourself? I finally looked at him. Not angry, not defensive, just calm. You believed I was slow for 20 years.
Pause.
Why is this harder to believe? He didn't answer. He couldn't, because the logic trapped him. My father closed the file slowly, carefully, like it might explode if he moved too fast. Even if this is true, he said, voice lower now, ownership can be negotiated. Of course, he was shifting from denial to control, because that's what he does. He doesn't fight reality. He buys it. I nodded slightly. Yes. That surprised him. Agreement was not what he expected. So let's talk numbers, he said immediately. There it was. Comfort. Familiar territory. Money.
Power.
Transactions. The illusion that everything has a price. I leaned back, relaxed, for the first time in the meeting, and smiled. Not wide. Just enough.
No.
That single word landed heavier than anything else I had said. The room shifted again. Now it wasn't confusion. It was something else. Uncertainty. Because refusal breaks negotiation. My father's expression hardened. Everything has a price. I shook my head slowly. Not this.
Pause.
Not anymore. He leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. Then what do you want? And that was the moment, the exact point where the entire dynamic flipped, because now he wasn't questioning me. He was asking. I let a breath pass. Slow, controlled. Then I said something no one in that room expected. I want nothing from you. Silence.
Heavy.
Uncomfortable. Because power without demand terrifies people. They don't know how to respond to it. That's not how this works, one executive muttered. I ignored him, still looking at my father. I already have everything I need, I continued. Pause. You just haven't realized it yet. His fingers tightened on the file. Explain.
So I did.
But not all at once. Never all at once. You don't reveal the full picture. You let them build it themselves, piece by piece, until the truth becomes unavoidable. The system you're trying to acquire, I said slowly, doesn't just predict behavior. I paused, watched their reactions. They think it optimizes performance. Another pause, but it doesn't. Now they were listening, really listening, because this was new, unexpected. It maps decision patterns, I continued, across entire networks. My father's eyes narrowed further. He was starting to see it, not fully, but enough to feel the danger. And once you map decision patterns, I said softly, you don't just predict choices.
Pause.
You guide them. No one spoke. No one moved, because that sentence landed deeper than anything else. It's not just a tool, I finished. It's infrastructure. And that's when it hit him.
I saw it. Clear. Sharp.
Undeniable. The realization. This isn't about a company, he said quietly. I smiled.
Small.
Controlled.
No.
Pause. It never was. The room felt smaller.
Tighter.
Like the walls had moved in. Then what is it about? He asked. I leaned forward slightly, matching his posture, matching his intensity. It's about control. Pause. And you gave it to me. That was the first time he looked unsure, because somewhere deep down, he knew. Every dismissal, every moment he pushed me aside, every time he underestimated me. It created the space I needed, the silence I used, the invisibility I mastered. He didn't just ignore me, he built me. And now, he was sitting across from the result. But there was still one piece missing, the part that would break him completely. I could have told him then. I could have ended it right there. But I didn't, because the most powerful moment isn't when you reveal the truth. It's when they realize it themselves. So I stood up.
Calm.
Unhurried. Finish your meeting, I said softly. And I walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one spoke, because they didn't know how. But just before I reached the exit, my father's voice cut through the silence.
Low.
Sharp. What aren't you telling me? I paused, hand on the door, smiled just slightly, and without turning around, I said, You're not trying to buy the system.
Pause.
You're already inside it. I opened the door and walked out. But what he still doesn't know, what none of them know yet, is that the system didn't just change the market. It changed them. Every decision they think they made, every risk they took, every strategic move they're proud of was already shaped, adjusted, guided.
By me.
And the worst part? They approved it. They implemented it. They trusted it. Without ever asking who built it. The door closed behind me. Soft, quiet, final. But inside that room, everything had already started collapsing. I didn't rush. I never rush. Speed is what they relied on, and speed is what blinded them. I walked through the hallway, heels echoing steady, controlled, like nothing had changed. But everything had. My phone vibrated once. Just once. No name. No message. Only a signal. Confirmation. Phase 3 activated. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the ground floor, and leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, not to relax, to remember. Every laugh, every word, every moment they decided I wasn't worth understanding. Delay. I almost smiled, because they were right in a way. I do take time, but not because I'm slow, because I calculate. The elevator doors opened. The lobby was full as always. Employees moving fast, talking, checking screens, reacting. Always reacting, never seeing the pattern. And that's why they lost. Not because I was smarter, but because I was quieter. And quiet people see everything. I walked outside. The air felt different. Not lighter, just complete. Another vibration. This time the message. Board triggered. Emergency session in 12 minutes.
Perfect.
I crossed the street slowly, ignoring the noise around me, because I already knew what was happening inside. Panic disguised as urgency. Voices rising. Blame shifting. Control slipping. They would start with denial, then anger, then desperation, and finally, submission. I reached the car waiting for me. Black. Unmarked. Driver silent. Just the way I prefer. As the city moved past the window, I opened my tablet. Not emails. Not news. Live data. Their system. My system. Every decision node. Every behavioral shift mapped. And right there, I watched it happen. My father's company initiated a defensive strategy, aggressive restructuring, high-risk acquisition attempt. Exactly as predicted. I tapped once, just once, a small adjustment, nothing dramatic, just a slight shift in probability weighting. And suddenly, their best option became their worst. That's the thing about control. You don't force outcomes. You guide choices. And people always believe they chose freely. The car stopped. Glass building. No logo. No public identity. Just another invisible piece of the network. I stepped inside. Security didn't ask questions. They never do. Not when the system already says, you belong. The private boardroom was waiting. 5 people. All older. All powerful. All aware. Unlike the others. They didn't underestimate me. That's why they were here. You moved earlier than expected, one of them said.
Calm.
Observing. I adjusted, I replied. Simple. No explanation. Another one leaned forward. They've triggered internal audit. Of course they did. Predictable. Desperate people always search for internal betrayal. They never consider. They were guided from the outside.
Let them, I said.
They won't find anything. Because there was nothing to find. No hack. No breach. No illegal access. Just better decisions. They're preparing a counter-acquisition, someone added. I nodded. I know. Silence. Then, do we stop them? That question always comes. Powerful people don't ask if they can. They ask if they should. I walked to the window, looked down at the city. So many lives, moving independently, thinking they control their direction. No, I said finally. Let them proceed. A pause. Not disagreement, just curiosity. Why? I turned slightly, met their eyes. Because they need to believe they still have power. Pause. Until they don't. That was enough. They understood. No one here needed full explanations. That's why they were chosen. Then we moved to final integration. One asked. I hesitated, not visibly, but internally. Final integration meant something irreversible.
Not just for them. For me.
It meant the system would no longer just guide markets. It would guide everything connected to them. Finance, media, behavior, perception. Power at a scale most people can't even imagine. I closed my eyes for a second and saw something unexpected. Not numbers, not patterns. Myself, 16 years old, standing in that classroom, struggling to read one sentence, while everyone laughed. And then, my father's voice, cold, distant, disappointed. Pressure builds strength. I opened my eyes, calm again, controlled. Yes, I said. Final integration. No one celebrated. No one smiled. Because this wasn't a victory. It was a shift. A permanent one. Minutes later, my screen lit up again. Live feed. Boardroom. My father's company. They were arguing now. Louder. Messier. Control gone. One executive slammed his hand on the table. Another stood up. Voices overlapping. And in the center, my father. Silent. Still. Watching. He wasn't reacting. He was thinking. And that's when I knew he was close. Closer than I expected. He picked up the file again, looked at the structure, the ownership layers, the connections. And then, slowly, his eyes shifted, not to the data, to the pattern.
To me.
Even though I wasn't there.
He understood something.
Not everything, but enough.
Stop, he said.
The room froze. We're not acquiring anything. Confusion, pushback, questions. He ignored them. This isn't a company, he said quietly. And then, the words I had been waiting for. It's a system. Silence. And we're already inside it. A chill moved through the room. I could feel it even from here. Because once you realize that, there's only one question left. Who controls it? He didn't say it out loud. He didn't need to. He already knew. My screen went dark. Feed cut. One of the board members looked at me. Is it done? I thought about that for a moment. Really thought about it. Was it done? The revenge. The control. The shift. Everything I built. Everything I planned. Everything they never saw coming. It was complete. And yet, something felt unfinished. Not in the system. In me. Because standing there, watching the man who once reduced me to nothing, finally understand, I didn't feel powerful. I felt empty. I turned off the tablet. Slowly. Yes, I said. It's done. But the truth, the part no one else could see, was that this was never just about winning. It was about being seen. And now that I wasn't sure what came next. Because when you spend your entire life building something in silence, and you finally reach the top. The silence doesn't leave you. It stays. And sometimes it's louder than everything you destroyed to get there.